In 1986, two ordinary workers were digging a simple drainage ditch in the mud of Sichuan province, China, when their shovels struck something metallic. They reached down into the dark earth and pulled it from the mud. It was a face, cast in heavy bronze, over a meter wide. It had ears that jutted sideways like wings, and strange eyes mounted on stalks that extended 10 centimeters beyond their sockets. It was staring up at them from a hole in the ground with an expression that simply did not belong to any human civilization they had ever studied. And there were more underneath. Dozens of massive bronze masks. Bronze trees standing over 4 meters tall with delicate gold fruit hanging from their branches. A standing human figure nearly 3 meters high, marking the tallest bronze statue ever recovered from the ancient world. All of it had been deliberately broken, burned, and buried in sacrificial pits roughly 3,000 years ago. Yet not a single word about any of it exists in any Chinese historical text. Not one character. A civilization that cast bronze with a mastery equal to ancient Greece or Egypt existed alongside China, the most heavily documented continuous civilization on Earth, and was apparently never mentioned. Not once, in 3,000 years of meticulous records. In the vast expanse of the Amazon, a lush forest that Europeans spent 5 centuries dismissing as empty wilderness, a laser scan in 2022 pierced through the canopy. It found cities. Not small tribal villages, but sprawling cities, connected by massive straight roads, surrounded by engineered farmland, complete with grand plazas and earthworks, suggesting a population that may have numbered in the millions. And in southern Turkey, resting on a sun-baked hilltop that farmers had been blindly plowing over for generations, a temple was quietly waiting. A temple 12,000 years old, built before agriculture existed, before pottery, before metal, before writing, before every single foundational element that historians confidently declared had to come first. The people who built it were wandering hunter-gatherers, people who were absolutely not supposed to be capable of organized, monumental construction. Every textbook in the world said so, but the temple does not care what the textbook says. This is our countdown of the hidden civilizations that even historians cannot believe were found. Stay with me until the end, because our #1 discovery completely rewrote the most basic rule of human history, and the bitter argument over what it truly means has not been settled to this day. Drop a comment right now telling us where in the world you are watching from. We want to see how far this hidden history reaches. Number 10. Nan Madol. Pohnpei in the Federated States of Micronesia. Imagine 92 artificial islands sitting directly on a coral reef, 3,000 kilometers away from the nearest continent. They are built from massive columns of black volcanic basalt, stacked methodically like Lincoln logs, horizontal and vertical, perfectly interlocking, forming fortress walls up to 8 meters high. Some of these stone columns weigh 50 tons. Some are longer than a standard school bus. But here is the problem. There is no basalt quarry on the reef. The nearest source of this volcanic rock is on the main island, across the treacherous open ocean. Somebody, somehow, moved tens of thousands of multi-ton basalt columns across the sea and stacked them intricately on a coral reef to build a floating city. Nan Madol was constructed between roughly 1200 and 1500 CE, serving as the ceremonial and political capital of the mighty Saudeleur dynasty. Extensive research compiled by the Smithsonian Institution places the monumental complex at roughly 1.5 square kilometers of reef and lagoon. The artificial islands are elegantly connected by a network of canals navigable only by canoe, earning Nan Madol the romantic nickname, the Venice of the Pacific. But the sheer engineering of the place has never been satisfactorily explained. Experts from the Micronesia Historic Preservation Office have estimated the total basalt used in the construction at a staggering 750,000 tons. How did anyone transport that much heavy stone in simple wooden canoes, using entirely pre-industrial technology? It is a question every single archaeologist who has studied the site has tried and failed to answer. Experimental archaeology has certainly tried. Back in 1995, a dedicated team from the University of Oregon attempted to move just one single basalt column using traditional methods, utilizing wooden rollers, sledges, and raw manpower. Moving just one column required dozens of exhausted workers and took far longer than the construction timeline of the city would realistically allow, if scaled up to the entire site. The native Pohnpeian oral tradition offers a very different answer. Local legends strongly insist that the Sodalor rulers did not drag the stones. They used magic to make the stones fly from the quarry to the reef. The stories say the colossal rocks simply floated through the air and dropped gently into position. Archaeologists, of course, say that is impossible. But those same archaeologists also cannot explain how it was actually done the conventional way. The massive stones are there. The distant quarry is there. The deep ocean sits between them. And the descendants of the people who built it simply smile and insist the rocks flew. Number 9. The Garamantes. The Fezzan region of Libya. We are in the dead middle of the Sahara Desert. Summer temperatures regularly exceed 50 degrees Celsius. Annual rainfall is effectively zero. Yet hundreds of thousands of people lived here, thrived here, for 1,000 years. The Garamantes controlled the Fezzan region of what is now southwestern Libya from roughly 500 BCE to 700 CE. 2 decades of grueling fieldwork led by researchers from the University of Leicester have definitively established that the Garamantes were not just a small, desperate nomadic group surviving at the harsh margins of the world. They were a highly advanced state-level society. They had fortified stone towns. They built monumental tombs. They supported a population that some estimates place comfortably in the hundreds of thousands. The obvious glaring question is, how do that many people survive in the most unforgiving desert on Earth with no river, no lake, and absolutely no rain? The answer lay underground. Geological surveys have identified a vast network of over 600 underground tunnels, known as fogaras, stretching for a combined length exceeding several hundred kilometers directly beneath the scorching desert surface. These ingenious tunnels tapped into a fossil aquifer, a massive reservoir of ancient water trapped deep in rock formations, left over from a much wetter climate thousands of years prior. Gravity did the hard work, pulling the precious water gently through the fogaras to the surface, irrigating lush farms and filling deep city reservoirs without a single mechanical pump. The mighty Roman Empire knew all about the Garamantes. The great Roman historian Tacitus recorded that Rome aggressively tried to subdue them, and Rome failed. The Garamantes would confidently raid Roman territories along the Mediterranean coast, take what they wanted, and then vanish back into the deep desert, where heavily armored Roman legions simply could not follow. Their empire was perfectly defended by the Sahara itself. No invading army could ever sustain a supply chain long enough to reach their hidden oasis cities. Their end, when it came, was not military. Modern hydrogeological analysis has revealed a tragic truth. The ancient fossil water sustaining the Garamantes was not being replenished. It was a strictly finite resource, water that had slowly accumulated over tens of thousands of years. The Garamantes drank it, farmed with it, and built an empire with it for roughly a millennium. And when the water was finally gone, they were gone. Rome could not defeat them. The brutal desert could not defeat them, but the dropping water table did. Number 8. Ciudad Perdida, the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta, Colombia. They were not trained archaeologists. They were tomb robbers. In 1972, a ruthless group of Colombian looters hacking their way through the suffocating jungle on the steep northern slopes of the Sierra Nevada stumbled upon something unnatural, a set of stone steps covered in thick moss. Curious and greedy, they followed them upward through the dense, humid forest. They climbed for over 1,000 steps, and at the top, wrapped in clouds and vines, they found an entire city. 169 perfectly carved stone terraces cut directly into the mountainside at roughly 900 meters above sea level. There were circular plazas, intricate stone pathways, and massive retaining walls. It was a sprawling settlement covering roughly 13 hectares, hidden under a jungle canopy so incredibly thick that no aerial survey had ever detected it. The looters fittingly called it El Infierno Verde, the Green Hell. They told no one about their discovery for years, quietly enriching themselves by selling exquisite gold figurines and ancient pottery on the black market. The Colombian Institute of Anthropology and History only became aware of the site's existence in 1976, after unusually massive volumes of distinct Tirona gold artifacts flooded the antiquities market, and authorities aggressively traced the smugglers back to the Sierra Nevada. Careful archaeological investigation eventually established that Ciudad Perdida, the lost city, was built around 800 CE by the Tirona civilization. That makes it roughly 650 years older than the famous Machu Picchu. Research indicates the city's population hovered between 2,000 and 8,000 people. It served as the beating political and manufacturing heart of a vast network of over 200 connected settlements draped across the mountain range. The Tirona did not just live on the mountain, they engineered it. Geological assessments have documented that the wide terraces are not simply flattened earth. They are highly complex, constructed platforms, featuring internal drainage systems deliberately designed to prevent catastrophic erosion on the steep, rain-battered slopes. A network of stone-lined channels moved rushing water through the city in tightly controlled paths. This brilliant engineering has kept the delicate terraces entirely intact for over 1,000 years, in a punishing region that receives over 2,000 millimeters of torrential rain every single year. Today, the punishing hike to reach Ciudad Perdida takes anywhere from 4 to 6 days of trekking through thick jungle, mud, and river crossings. There is no access road. There is no comfortable helicopter landing pad. Roughly 15,000 adventurous tourists make the grueling trek annually. That is a tiny fraction of the millions who casually take the train to visit Machu Picchu. The Kogi and Wiwa indigenous peoples, the direct living descendants of the Tirona, still inhabit the Sierra Nevada. They serve as the fierce spiritual guardians of the site. In rare interviews, Kogi leaders have made one very specific, poignant point to the outside world. They did not lose the city. They intentionally chose to let the deep forest cover it to protect it. Machu Picchu gets the flashing cameras and the millions of tourists. Ciudad Perdida stays quiet, hidden exactly where it belongs. Number 7. The mysterious civilization of Shimao, Shaanxi Province, China. In the year 2011, archaeologists conducting a routine survey on a barren hilltop in northern Shaanxi Province, near the desolate border with Inner Mongolia, found a stone wall. They started following it. It didn't stop. It went on for kilometers. And hidden behind that massive wall lay a city. And in the very center of that city stood a towering, stepped pyramid built entirely from stone, rising roughly 70 meters above the surrounding wind-swept plain. Nobody knew it was there. Extensive research, later published in the journal Antiquity, identified Shimao as a colossal fortified city covering roughly 4 square kilometers. It dates back to approximately 2300 to 1800 BCE. That makes this sprawling stone metropolis contemporary with the majestic Egyptian Old Kingdom, contemporary with the very earliest cities of Mesopotamia. The giant pyramid at Shimao was not a silent tomb for a dead king. Excavations revealed clear evidence of sprawling palatial buildings, intense craft production, and complex water supply infrastructure right on the upper terraces. It was a thriving center of living power. Its total surface area at the base actually exceeds that of the Great Pyramid of Giza. But when archaeologists excavated the city's grand eastern gate, they found something deeply disturbing. Roughly 70 human skulls were recovered from dark, deliberate pits beneath and within the thick stone walls. Bioarchaeological analysis later confirmed a chilling detail. The victims were almost entirely young women. Furthermore, isotopic analysis of their teeth indicated they had not grown up in Shimao. They had been brought from a completely different region, strongly suggesting they were prisoners of war or captives. The terrifying truth was that these skulls were placed deliberately during the gate's construction. They were foundation offerings. Somebody built a massive, impenetrable wall directly on top of the severed heads of young captive women. And then there was the jade. Exquisite jade artifacts recovered from the site included thousands of strange, eye-shaped ornaments embedded directly into the stone blocks of the pyramid's walls. The excavation team documented that these jade eyes were placed specifically facing outward, as if they were watching. The final visual effect was a towering, monstrous stone pyramid, glowing with dozens of green jade eyes, staring out ominously over the vast plain. And here's the part that historians genuinely cannot explain. The earliest Chinese dynastic records, famous for their obsessive detail, began roughly 500 years after Shimao was mysteriously abandoned. By the time anyone was writing Chinese history down, Shimao had already been completely forgotten. A massive city, armed with a pyramid larger than Giza, decorated with eerie jade eyes, built on the severed skulls of captive women, existed for centuries. And nobody in the 4,000 years since, in the most documented, continuous historical record on planet Earth, ever mentioned it. Number 6. Akrotiri, the island of Santorini, Greece. Sometime around 1600 BCE, the towering volcano on the island of Thera in the Aegean Sea woke up, and when it erupted with a catastrophic force estimated at roughly 4 times that of the legendary Krakatoa. Modern volcanological studies place the terrifying ash column at roughly 36 kilometers high, piercing the stratosphere. The apocalyptic explosion completely blew out the center of the island, instantly creating the massive submerged caldera that functions as Santorini's picturesque harbor today. The resulting mega tsunami violently struck coastlines all across the eastern Mediterranean. But buried deep under up to 40 meters of suffocating volcanic ash on the southern tip of the island, there was a city. Excavations at Akrotiri, which only began in 1967, revealed a spectacular Minoan settlement preserved in a condition that is constantly compared to Pompeii, except this city is 1,500 years older. The multi-story buildings are still standing. The narrow, winding streets are perfectly intact. The intricate drainage system, which featured indoor toilets seamlessly connected to a master sewage network running deep beneath the paving stones, was more advanced than anything Europe would see again until the peak of the Roman Empire over 1,000 years later. But it is the vibrant frescoes that make people stop and stare. Wall paintings, perfectly preserved by the blanket of ash, boasting colors so incredibly vivid they look like they were painted yesterday. Swallows dancing in flight, children wearing specialized boxing gloves in the middle of a match, proud fishermen carrying heavy strings of fresh fish, a majestic fleet of ships arriving at a bustling harbor, with joyful dolphins leaping alongside the bows. Art historians universally recognize the Akrotiri frescoes as the absolute most complete surviving visual record of daily life in the Bronze Age Aegean. But as the ash was cleared away, a chilling detail emerged from the excavation records that no one has fully been able to explain. There are no bodies, not one. Unlike Pompeii, where terrified citizens were frozen in their final, agonizing moments, every single excavation season at Akrotiri has confirmed the exact same eerie finding. 0 skeletons. 0 human remains of any kind. In Pompeii, thousands died because they waited too long. In Akrotiri, everyone left. The archaeological evidence shows the city was actually partially dismantled before the big eruption. Heavy wooden doors had been systematically removed from their hinges. High-value portable items were entirely missing. The wealthy, educated residents of Akrotiri clearly knew the eruption was coming. They didn't panic. They packed their belongings. They respectfully gathered their dead from the cemeteries. They took their doors. They calmly boarded that beautiful fleet of ships painted on their own walls, and they sailed away into the Mediterranean. Where they went and whether they survived the subsequent tsunamis that ravaged the ancient world is a profound mystery that 3,600 years of history has never answered. Number 5. Mohenjo-Daro, Sindh Province, Pakistan. Everyone knows the mighty pharaohs of Egypt. Everyone knows the fierce warrior kings of Mesopotamia. But ask any historian who ran the incredible Indus Valley civilization, and they will give you a blank stare. There is no answer. The crown jewel of this mystery is the city of Mohenjo-Daro, roughly 4,500 years old. When British archaeologist John Marshall ordered his team to dig beneath the crumbling Buddhist ruins he was investigating in the 1920s, he didn't find just another temple. He broke into a master-planned metropolis, a city laid out on a perfect mathematical grid, utilizing completely standardized brick sizes and featuring an enclosed drainage system that ran directly beneath every single street. And it was not an isolated anomaly. Over the following decades, stunned archaeologists identified more than 1,000 distinct settlements belonging to this exact same civilization, scattered across a vast territory significantly larger than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. Mohenjo-Daro itself housed roughly 40,000 people. Excavations documented a massive, meticulously engineered public bath, waterproofed with a layer of natural bitumen that modern engineers have described as remarkably effective. Ordinary private homes had their own individual water wells, and incredibly, private indoor bathrooms connected to that covered street-level sewage system. It was a level of urban hygiene and sanitation that would simply not be seen again in the Indian subcontinent until the modern era. The bricks alone are a mystery. Archaeological research has documented that the baked bricks used across this entire civilization, at sites separated by over 1,000 kilometers of tough terrain, maintained an absolutely perfect mathematical ratio of 1 to 2 to 4 for length, width, and height. The exact same ratio everywhere for centuries. But here is what makes Mohenjo-Daro genuinely, unsettlingly strange. Decades of deep excavation across hundreds of Indus Valley sites have found no grand palace, no central temple, no opulent throne room, no monumental statue of a divine ruler. There are no depictions of glorious warfare, no massive weapons caches, and no mass graves. Imagine a sophisticated civilization of millions of people, territorially larger than Egypt, more urbanized than Mesopotamia, maintaining strict, standardized engineering codes across 1,000 kilometers and leaving zero evidence of who was actually in charge. Leading experts who have spent their entire lives studying the Indus Valley call this one of the greatest unsolved puzzles in all of archaeology. The civilization appears to have operated smoothly for centuries, without a centralized autocratic ruler. How do you maintain strict standardization across such a vast populated area without a ruthless state apparatus forcing people to comply? It is a question that a century of digging has completely failed to answer. No king, no temple, no army, no war. Just 40,000 people living in a peaceful city with indoor plumbing and mathematically perfect bricks, governed by a mysterious social system so alien to everything else in the ancient world that we cannot even identify it. And whatever this system was, it worked flawlessly for roughly 700 years, far longer than most empires ruled by kings. Number 4. The urban Amazon. Multiple sites across Brazil, Bolivia, and Ecuador for 5 long centuries. Absolutely everyone was wrong about the Amazon basin. The world's largest rainforest was universally considered one of the last great untouched wildernesses. It was supposedly too dense, possessing soil too poor, and an environment too hostile for large-scale, complex human habitation. When the desperate Spanish conquistador Francisco de Orellana sailed down the Amazon River in 1542, he returned to Europe with wild tales. He reported seeing vast, gleaming cities lining the riverbanks, wide roads, massive farms, and complex populations numbering in the tens of thousands. European historians promptly laughed at him, dismissing his vivid accounts as the sun-addled fantasies of a starving man. The brutal jungle, they arrogantly stated, could not support civilization. In 2022, a laser scanning technology called LiDAR finally proved Orellana right. A groundbreaking study published in the journal Nature revealed an immense hidden network of urban settlements lurking beneath the thick forest canopy in Bolivia. These weren't small camps. The settlements featured towering pyramidal platform mounds up to 22 meters high, They were connected by incredibly wide, perfectly straight causeways, extending for kilometers straight through the dense forest. Intricate canals and massive reservoirs indicated a highly sophisticated understanding of water management. These settlements thrived from roughly 500 to 1400 CE, with the largest sites housing many thousands of people. And the discoveries didn't stop there. In 2024, an even more explosive LiDAR study in the journal Science revealed a significantly older and larger network in the Upano Valley of Ecuador. Dating back to roughly 500 BCE, this network includes over 6,000 massive earthen structures, grand plazas, and highway-like roads spread across 300 square kilometers. Population estimates run well into the tens of thousands. The implication hit the global archaeological community like an earthquake. The Amazon was never empty. It was heavily managed. The vast forest itself may actually have been intentionally shaped by human agricultural activity over millennia. It was a carefully cultivated, massive landscape that arriving European colonists foolishly mistook for virgin wilderness. Why? Because the brilliant people who built and managed it had already been wiped out. Long before most Europeans ever laid eyes on the deep jungle, unseen European diseases like smallpox and measles had raced ahead along ancient indigenous trade networks, utterly decimating the population. Without humans to cut back the relentless growth, the jungle rapidly swallowed the cities whole. The Europeans who arrived a generation or two later looked at the towering, silent trees and simply concluded that no one had ever been there. The jungle was not too dense for civilization. The civilization was the jungle. Number 3. Sanxing Dui, Guanghan, Sichuan Province, China. 2 brick factory workers. That is who blew the lid off one of the greatest artistic mysteries in human history. In 1986, ordinary laborers at a muddy construction site near the city of Guanghan uncovered 2 rectangular pits. Inside, they found a chaotic pile of objects that simply did not match anything ever found in 3,000 years of meticulous Chinese archaeology. We are talking about heavy bronze masks with sharp, angular features and bizarrely protruding eyes. Staffs completely wrapped in pure gold leaf, razor-sharp jade blades, a staggering bronze tree over 4 meters tall, its delicate branches decorated with bronze birds, flowers, and fruit crafted from gold. Archaeologists quickly dated the sacrificial pits to roughly 1200 to 1000 BCE, firmly placing them in the late Shang dynasty period. But here is the problem. Absolutely nothing in those pits actually resembles Shang culture. The artistic aesthetic is entirely alien. The massive masks have sharp, non-human features that do not appear in any known Chinese art tradition before or since. The eerie eyes on the largest mask protrude outward on thick, cylindrical stalks, a terrifying artistic choice that has no parallel anywhere in East Asian history. Between 2020 and 2021, archaeologists carefully opened 6 more sacrificial pits at the site. They recovered over 13,000 additional artifacts. Among them was a stunning gold mask, weighing roughly 280 grams, perfectly fitted to cover the face of a bronze head. They found a complex bronze altar depicting elaborate mythological scenes and delicate fragments of actual silk, the oldest silk artifacts ever discovered in southwestern China. But what makes Sanxing Dui truly terrifying is how these objects were treated. They were not just buried, they were violently destroyed. The excavation team's analysis proves the destruction was incredibly deliberate, highly ritualistic, and required immense physical effort. Massive bronze vessels were intentionally smashed to pieces. Heavy masks were physically bent out of shape. Precious gold was crumpled and folded. The ruined masterpieces were then thrown into the deep pits alongside over 100 whole elephant tusks, and then set on fire at extremely high temperatures before finally being buried under tons of earth. Yet the central, most maddening mystery of Sanxing Dui is not the bizarre masks or the violent destruction. It is the absolute deafening silence. Chinese historical records from the Shang and Zhou dynasties are famously detailed. They document rival kingdoms, massive wars, shifting alliances, and complex tribute relationships all across the Chinese cultural sphere. Yet, leading scholars have confirmed a terrifying absence. Not a single surviving text from that entire period ever mentions a massive, wealthy, bronze-producing civilization thriving in the Sichuan Basin. This is not a minor clerical omission. San Xingdui was producing bronze at a staggering scale and quality. Doing so required massive, organized mining operations, complex smelting infrastructure, and a highly privileged class of specialist artisans who had to be fed by an enormous agricultural surplus. Furthermore, advanced metallurgical analysis has proven that the chemical alloy compositions of the San Xingdui bronzes are fundamentally different from those used in the Shang heartland. They didn't borrow the technology, they developed it themselves. We are looking at a hyper-advanced civilization that cast bronze as well as anyone on planet Earth. A civilization that willingly burned its own priceless masterpieces and buried them alongside 100 elephant tusks. A civilization that existed for centuries right next to the most obsessively documented cultural sphere of the ancient world. And the ancient Chinese, who literally wrote down everything, somehow never wrote down a single word about them. The alien masks sit quietly in a museum now, their stalk-like eyes still protruding, staring out, waiting for someone, anyone, to explain where they came from. Number 2. Hoya de Seren, El Salvador. It was June of 1976. A heavy bulldozer was violently clearing land for a mundane government grain silo project in a Zapotitan valley, when the massive steel blades suddenly struck something unnatural deep beneath the topsoil. The annoyed operator killed the engine and climbed down to inspect the damage. Sticking out of the freshly torn earth, he saw perfectly plastered clay walls. Knowing something was very wrong, he stopped the machine and made a phone call. That phone call brought Payson Sheets, a brilliant archaeologist from the University of Colorado, to the muddy site. Sheets took one look at what the bulldozer had ripped open and realized they hadn't just found an old wall. They had found an entire Maya village, perfectly entombed under 14 distinct layers of dense volcanic ash. Hoya de Seren is frequently called the Pompeii of the Americas, but that dramatic comparison actually misses the point entirely. Pompeii was a city of the elite. It preserved wealthy Roman villas, grand marble temples, and political architecture. Seren preserved something infinitely rarer in the archaeological record, an ordinary, working-class Maya farming village. It captured the exact, unvarnished reality of what regular people were doing on one specific, quiet afternoon in the year 600 CE. At the exact moment, their world suddenly ended. The nearby Loma Caldera volcano erupted with terrifying speed. Decades of meticulous excavation have proven that the villagers had roughly 1 single hour of warning. They didn't hesitate. They dropped whatever was in their hands and they ran for their lives. The preservation under the rapid ashfall is breathtaking. Archaeologists uncovered painted ceramic bowls still holding half-eaten meals of food. They found perfectly clear human fingerprints pressed into the wet clay of jars that were set down mid-use. Woven sleeping mats were still rolled out peacefully in the bedrooms. A small community ceremonial building was found with the fragile remains of a religious offering still resting gently on the altar. They uncovered a working sauna and heavily stocked storerooms filled with dried beans, spicy chilies, raw cotton, and precious cacao seeds, all neatly sorted into different clay containers. But the absolute most extraordinary discovery at Seren wasn't inside the houses. It was out in the fields. The hot volcanic ash blanketed the agricultural fields completely, flash fossilizing the crops exactly as they were growing. Tiny maize plants, roughly 2 months into their growing season, were frozen in position forever. The ash captured the delicate imprint of their leaves, their shallow roots, and, most importantly, the highly specific geometric pattern of the dirt ridges the farmers had planted them in. This was explosive. The farmers at Seren had planted their corn using a highly sophisticated system called ridge and furrow agriculture. For over a century, brilliant Western scholars had confidently assumed this advanced technique was introduced to the Americas by the Spanish over 1,000 years later. The fossilized corn at Seren proved, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that ordinary Maya farmers had been using it to master their environment since at least 600 CE. Overnight, every single textbook ever written on pre-Columbian agriculture had to be violently updated. The good news is, the residents of Seren escaped. Sheet's exhaustive analysis found absolutely zero human remains trapped in the village itself. Like the people of Akrotiri, everyone got out in time. But unlike Akrotiri, this escape was raw, chaotic panic. There was no time to pack valuables. Nobody took the doors off the hinges. They ran with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Where they ran to, whether they actually survived the suffocating ash cloud, whether they told their terrifying story to relatives in neighboring valleys, or whether their heartbroken descendants ever returned to look for their homes. None of that is known. The vibrant little village was swallowed by 14 layers of ash, nearly a meter thick, and it stayed absolutely silent in the dark for 1,400 years, until a bulldozer, meant to build a grain silo, accidentally scraped the ceiling of a lost world. And finally, number 1, Göbekli Tepe, Şanlıurfa Province, Turkey. In the year 1994, an ordinary Kurdish shepherd named Savak Yildiz was walking his flock across a dusty, barren hilltop in southeastern Turkey. As he walked, his eye caught something strange. A large stone protruding awkwardly from the dry dirt. It didn't look like the jagged, natural limestone that littered the rest of the hillside. It had a perfectly flat, smooth surface. It had a sharp, intentionally carved edge. He told someone. That someone casually contacted the local museum. The museum reached out to the German Archaeological Institute, and in 1995, a brilliant and relentless archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt arrived at that dusty hilltop, looked down at the carved stone, and began to dig. What Klaus Schmidt pulled out of that hill fundamentally destroyed human history as we knew it. Decades of painstaking excavation revealed a massive, breathtaking complex of circular stone enclosures. They were built from colossal, T-shaped limestone pillars. Some of these monolithic pillars weighed over 15 tons. Some towered nearly 6 meters into the sky, and they were not just blank rock. The pillars were intricately, beautifully carved with high-relief sculptures of wild animals. Fierce foxes, charging boars, slithering snakes, looming vultures, stinging scorpions, and roaring lions, all executed in a bizarre artistic style that had absolutely no precedent anywhere in the archaeological record. But the carvings weren't the problem. The date was the problem. Repeated, rigorous radiocarbon dating definitively placed the earliest construction of these massive stone circles at approximately 9,500 BCE. That is 12,000 years ago. And according to absolutely everything the science of archaeology had established over the previous 200 years, 12,000 years ago, human beings were primitive hunter-gatherers. They did not have agriculture. They did not have domesticated pack animals. They did not live in permanent settlements. They absolutely did not have the massive surplus of food, the complex social hierarchy, or the sheer organized labor force required to systematically quarry, transport, intricately carve, and vertically erect 15-ton stone pillars. They were simply not supposed to be capable of doing this. The standard, unbreakable model of human development, taught in every prestigious university on Earth, followed one very clear, logical sequence. Farming comes first. Farming creates surplus food. Surplus food allows humans to stop wandering and build permanent settlements. Permanent settlements allow populations to grow, creating social complexity and ruling classes. Social complexity allows for the organization of massive labor forces. Organized labor forces build monumental architecture. Therefore, complex religion and massive stone temples only arrive at the very end of the evolutionary chain, not the beginning. Göbekli Tepe took that undisputed textbook sequence, tore it to shreds, and threw it in the fire. Schmidt's exhaustive analysis of the site found absolutely zero evidence of permanent human habitation. There were no houses. There were no garbage pits. There were no grain storage facilities. There were no agricultural tools of any kind. The people who built this massive, awe-inspiring complex were wandering hunter-gatherers who traveled from vast distances to this specific hilltop, worked together to build something impossible, and then packed up and left. The terrifying implication was clear. The deeply human desire to create a sacred, monumental space came before agriculture. It came before permanent settlement. It came before everything. Religion did not slowly emerge from civilization. Civilization emerged because of religion. The global reaction from the archaeological community was shock, denial, and fierce debate. To this day, researchers argue over the site. Some point to faint traces of grain processing at nearby contemporary sites, desperately arguing that early agriculture must have been developing simultaneously, hoping to save the traditional timeline. But the massive, silent pillars remain completely unexplained by any traditional model. Experimental archaeology has mathematically calculated that simply quarrying and dragging a single 15-ton pillar from the nearby limestone bedrock would require a highly coordinated, perfectly synchronized workforce of at least 500 strong men. How do you feed 500 hungry hunter-gatherers in one barren location for months at a time without a massive, pre-existing agricultural supply chain? And then there is the final, darkest secret of Göbekli Tepe, a detail that almost every pop history article conveniently leaves out. Klaus Schmidt's detailed excavation records proved beyond a doubt that this glorious temple was not simply abandoned to the wind. It was executed. It was buried on purpose. After using the magnificent enclosures for centuries, the ancient builders systematically filled them in. Layer by agonizing layer, they dumped thousands of tons of heavy rubble, earth, massive amounts of animal bones, and broken stone tools directly into the sacred circles. They completely swallowed the towering T-shaped pillars. They sealed the snarling animal carvings deep beneath mountains of dirt. Someone, or thousands of someones, spent an utterly enormous amount of physical effort to completely erase what they had built. Schmidt himself estimated that the act of burying the temple was just as labor-intensive as the original, impossible construction. They didn't just walk away from Göbekli Tepe, they put it in the dark, on purpose. And then, for roughly 10,000 years, the greatest secret in human history stayed there, resting silently under a dry Turkish hilltop that generations of simple shepherds walked over every single day, completely unaware that the oldest, most impossible monumental architecture on planet Earth was resting directly beneath the soles of their boots. A shepherd noticed a stone. A German archaeologist spent the rest of his life digging, and what came out of that hillside forced humanity to rewrite the very first chapter of our own story. We were always told that brutal survival came first, then farming, then cozy villages, and finally, gods. Göbekli Tepe screams that it happened the other way around. The gods came first. The sheer, overwhelming need to build a temple came first, and everything else, every farm, every village, every sprawling city, every bloody kingdom, every globe-spanning empire, everything that followed for the next 12,000 years may have only started because a group of wild hunter-gatherers looked at a barren hilltop and decided, against all logic, that it needed a cathedral. They built it. They carved fierce animals into solid stone. They raised pillars heavier than school buses. And when they were finally done with it, for reasons that nobody in 12,000 years has been able to comprehend, they buried it. The hilltop kept their massive secret for 100 centuries. A shepherd's curiosity finally ended the silence. And today, the giant pillars, with their carved foxes, vultures, and scorpions, are standing in the open air again for the very first time since the Ice Age ended, staring blankly at a modern world that never even knew they were there. 10 civilizations, 92 massive basalt islands stacked miraculously on a coral reef in the Pacific by a kingdom whose descendants confidently say the heavy stones simply flew. An advanced empire in the middle of the scorching Sahara that drank from a 10,000-year-old underground ocean until the water finally ran dry. a sprawling, engineered city hidden in the dense Colombian jungle, 650 years older than Machu Picchu, accidentally found by ruthless tomb robbers and fiercely guarded by the indigenous people who originally built it. A towering stone pyramid in China, glowing with eerie jade eyes, its walls built upon the severed skulls of 70 captive women that 3,000 years of obsessive Chinese history completely forgot to mention. A beautiful, advanced city buried under mountains of volcanic ash, complete with vivid painted walls and running water, where every single resident escaped in time, taking their doors with them, and no one knows where they went. A highly sanitized city of 40,000 people with indoor plumbing, perfect mathematical bricks, and absolutely no evidence of a king, no central temple, and no standing army. Massive, sprawling cities in the Amazon basin that the relentless forest consumed only after unseen European diseases slaughtered the brilliant people who engineered it. A hyper-advanced bronze civilization in China that forged alien masks with terrifying, protruding eyes that match absolutely nothing else on Earth before violently smashing them and burning them in pits. An ordinary Maya village, perfectly flash-frozen in time, with fossilized corn still in the ground and human fingerprints still wet in the clay, proving textbooks wrong about agriculture. And a massive, impossible stone temple on a Turkish hilltop built 12,000 years ago by wandering people who were not supposed to be capable of building anything, who then spent enormous effort to bury it on purpose and walk away into the mist. Every single one of these magnificent civilizations was completely invisible to us, buried under suffocating ash, thick jungle, shifting sand, deep ocean, or the arrogant assumption that they simply could not exist. And every single time one of them surfaced, it violently broke something we thought we knew for a fact. The history textbooks are not necessarily wrong, they are just heartbreakingly incomplete. And every time someone notices a strange stone protruding from the dirt, or points a sweeping laser through a jungle canopy, or accidentally hits something hard with a bulldozer they were driving for a completely different reason, the incomplete parts get just a little bit larger. The ground beneath our feet is full of things we have not found yet. The dark ocean floor is full of things we have not even thought to look for. And the next great civilization, the one that will completely change what we think we know about ourselves, is probably sitting right now, quietly, under a gentle hill that someone casually walks over every single day without ever stopping to look down. Which of these civilizations changed what you thought you knew? Tell us down in the comments. And if you made it to the end of this journey, you already know this channel is for you. Hit subscribe, turn on those notifications, because the next video is taking you somewhere even more hidden. We will see you there.